When I was a kid, I would pick up any book that interested me, from comic books to shiny magazines to often a dictionary. I would pick them up, flip through the pages, and then start reading the sections that interested me the most. I did not care about the book cover, I did not care about the author or the genre. I did not even care about the content or the order in which I read them. I just loved the idea of exploring. I loved the idea of reading and the joy that I got from stumbling upon something new. And when I did come across something new, I would go and tell other people about it. I would share it with as many people as I could. Now, most of these people were older than me, so they did not care about what I had found out. Maybe because they already knew about those things. Perhaps they were already exposed to them way before I was. But for me, it was all new and exciting. Although once in a while, someone would thank me for telling them something new, which then got me excited enough to read some more and find out more things that I could share with everyone. And sometimes someone would ask me a question about whatever I had read. They would quiz me on it, or they would mention something that I did not know about. And that would make me curious too. I would then go and look for the answers to those questions. It was so much fun. I felt encouraged, I felt free and curious all at the same time. So for example, if I came across a new word, I would go and flip the pages of the dictionary and try to find out the meaning of that word. And in the act of searching for that meaning, I would often come across some more words, and then I would try and find out their meaning. And if it was a new idea or a concept, I would look for the adjacent ideas and concepts. So in a way, I always followed the breadcrumbs of curiosity, which essentially made learning easy and fun. There was always a vague map, a definite action, and the possibility of a reward associated with this kind of learning. And this continued until I was 9 or 10 years old. And somewhere around that time, I started to get influenced by what others around me were doing, things that other kids or adults were reading, things that were known or popular, the bestsellers, the classics, the must-reads. So I started to read books that were recommended by my teachers. I would read the ones that the older people were reading, the ones that the nerdy kids in the class were reading. I would try to pick up classics. I would go to book fairs and buy the thickest book I could find. And I would tell myself that these are the books to be read, that I must finish these books, else there is no point in reading anything. That if I did not read them, then I would be left behind. So there was a fear of missing out. There was a fear of not doing enough. Now, I did enjoy reading some books through this process. I would make some progress with great difficulty. I would also finish certain books, but I would only understand the message or the story superficially. And more often than not, I would just give up in between because there was no engagement, there was no enjoyment through this process. It felt hard. It felt like a task. I had to push myself to read. And also because right around that time, I developed this mindset that a book is this divine thing that has to be revered. And that act of reverence looks like reading it from front to back, cover to cover. That's the whole point of reading a book. That reading a book is a serious thing done by serious people. And if you do not do it seriously, then you are not a reader, you are an imposter. And I also started to believe that it's a shameful act to glance over a book or jump sections and read the ones that interested me. And around that time, I also bought into this narrative that abandoning a book is an act of failure, and abandoning a dozen books is almost a sinful act. Like it's a crime to spend your parents' hard-earned money on books that you are not going to read. That it's a pointless exercise to issue dozens of books from the library if you are not going to read all of them end to end. And just for context, this was in the 90s and early 2000s. So it was way before the Kindles and the Audibles and the Apple books. This was around the time when you literally had to go outside to get a book, and you couldn't tap on a screen to magically find what you wanted to read. But the point is that this mindset that I was developing was not my own. I had borrowed it from other people, the society, from my elders, from the media, from institutions. And it was a bad mindset because it stunted my growth. It stunted my innate curious nature because I was controlled by shame and fear, and was tricky because on one hand, it was about not keeping up with everyone, about being left behind, about not knowing enough about the world. And on the other hand, it was also about not being able to do enough, about trying and failing, about simply not being capable enough. Because if you did not read all the great books that others were reading, you were going to be left behind. But if you attempted to read them and did not like them or abandon them in between, then you were simply a failure. And once you're trapped in this poor and self-inflicted frame of mind, you tend to give up on reading. And that's what I did. I stopped reading for many years. I mean, I would still read, but only if I was really compelled to read, when I knew I wouldn't fail in the process. But it was a hard thing to sustain. And I'm sure I'm not the only one who fell in this trap. We all do, because we want to follow something we really love doing, and then the society tells us something else. It tells us that it's the wrong approach or it's not enough. And it may not tell us those things explicitly, but that's what it hints at. So we start comparing ourselves with other people. We start being like other people. And it's not just limited to reading. It's also about the kind of content we consume, the kind of hobbies we want to pursue. We feel compelled to watch the most popular movies, feel compelled to participate in the most popular fads, trends, craze, from content to diet to fashion. But when it comes to reading, it's far worse, because once you fall in this trap of comparison and start getting influenced by other people, you stop growing. And in my case, it took me at least 2 decades to unlearn this behavior, to abandon this negative mindset, to start following my own curiosity again and not feel like I was shackled by these invisible belief systems. It took me a long time to go back to being a child all over again and embrace my curious nature. It took me a long time to understand that reading is about learning, and learning is a non-linear, iterative, and a qualitative approach. And it's not this fixed and this rigid thing that you do. So, if you pick up a book on a topic that interests you, and I'm talking about non-fiction here, you could start reading it from the very first chapter, and that's fine. But in between, if you have the strong urge to jump a few pages or a few sections and go to the section that you are really interested in reading, I think you should do that. And after a few pages or after a few chapters, if you suddenly get interested in learning about a new topic, you should pick up a different book that solves that problem. And once you have read that new book, you can always come back to the previous book and pick it up again. And this non-linear approach, this curiosity-driven approach, makes learning the primary thing and the act of reading the secondary thing. It keeps the play, the engagement, and the enjoyment alive. It keeps you in flow. But what it also does is that it exposes you to more things. And once you get exposed to more things, you also have more knowledge gaps. And to fill these knowledge gaps, you are always on a lookout for more information, for more experiences, for more resources, because the act of acquiring more information and the lack of information created in that pursuit kind of feed each other. This back and forth process perpetuates this self-feeding cycle. And it also frees you from this emotion of guilt or shame of abandoning books, from this fear of missing out on what the rest of the world is learning or getting exposed to. Because here you are not doing anything under pressure. You are simply feeding your most true nature, and that knows what it needs, what it wants to learn. It is the thing that is closest to your own innate values. And of course, it's not a static thing. It's dynamic in nature. It evolves, it changes, it grows. But it does all of that on its own terms. And so over the years, I have changed my reading approach. I now follow certain methods that help me read more. And if you want to learn about them, you should check out this video over here. And I will see you next time.